I've been a huge X-Men fan for as long as I can remember, and Days of Future Past has always been one of my favorite entries in the franchise. Every time I watched it, I found myself wondering the same thing. How did they actually film all of this? The answer turned out to be even more impressive than I expected. So today, we're diving behind the scenes to uncover the practical effects, visual effects, and filmmaking secrets that brought this incredible movie to life. One of the film's most intense moments takes place aboard the X-Jet when a heated argument between Magneto and Professor Charles Xavier suddenly escalates. As Magneto loses his temper, he begins crushing the aircraft's metallic structure with his magnetic powers, causing the entire cabin to twist violently while everyone inside is thrown off balance. The sequence feels incredibly real, and that's because much of the chaos actually happened on set. Instead of relying entirely on CGI, the production built a full-scale replica of the X-Jet's interior inside the studio. The entire cabin was then mounted several feet above the ground on a massive 3-axis hydraulic gimbal rig. This computer-controlled platform was capable of tilting, rotating, and violently shaking the entire aircraft in multiple directions, accurately simulating the movement of a plane being torn apart by Magneto's powers. As the gimbal moved, the actors weren't pretending to lose their balance. They were genuinely struggling against real physical motion. Every sudden tilt and violent shift inside the cabin forced the cast to react naturally, adding a level of realism that would have been difficult to achieve through acting alone. Without a doubt, the Quicksilver kitchen sequence has become one of the most iconic slow-motion scenes ever created in modern cinema. The moment Quicksilver activates his super speed, time appears to almost stop. Water hangs motionless in the air, bullets freeze inches from their targets, knives, plates, vegetables, and shattered glass remain suspended in mid-air while Quicksilver casually walks through the chaos, effortlessly changing the outcome of the entire fight. Although the finished sequence lasts only around 3 minutes, it required months of planning and nearly every filmmaking technique available to Bryan Singer's production team. Long before cameras ever rolled, the entire scene was designed using pre-visualization. Every camera move, every one of Quicksilver's footsteps, each officer he would interact with, and even the exact position of every floating carrot, knife, plate, bullet, and droplet of water was mapped out digitally in advance. This detailed blueprint allowed every department, from stunt coordination to visual effects, to work from the same plan. Many viewers assume the Pentagon kitchen existed entirely inside a computer, but that's far from the truth. The production actually built a full-scale practical kitchen set where nearly all of the live-action photography took place. The biggest creative challenge was making Quicksilver appear to move at normal speed while the rest of the world was almost completely frozen. To achieve this effect, the filmmakers used phantom high-speed cameras capable of recording at approximately 3,200 frames per second, far beyond the standard 24 frames per second used for most movies. When this footage was played back at normal speed, even a fraction of a second stretched into several moments. Filming at such extreme frame rates came with one major drawback: lighting. Because high-speed cameras capture thousands of frames every second, each individual frame receives only a tiny amount of light. To compensate, the kitchen set had to be flooded with incredibly powerful lighting. According to members of the cast, the set was brighter than standing outside on a sunny afternoon. Simply keeping their eyes open became surprisingly difficult, but without that intense illumination, the footage would have been far too dark to use. The frozen police officers also required a surprisingly simple solution. For many shots, the actors themselves stood perfectly still for extended periods, carefully holding their poses so that even the slightest movement wouldn't be visible. Whenever tiny movements couldn't be avoided, the visual effects team later cleaned them up digitally, creating the illusion that time had completely stopped. The countless floating objects scattered throughout the kitchen, knives, dishes, vegetables, soup, shattered glass, bullets, and water droplets, were created using a combination of practical props and computer graphics. While some objects were physically suspended on rigs during filming, many others were modeled digitally afterward. The visual effects artists carefully matched their lighting, reflections, shadows, and motion to the practical footage, making it nearly impossible to distinguish the CGI elements from the real ones. Perhaps the most astonishing fact is that this single 3-minute sequence required 8 to 9 days of filming. Nearly every individual shot demanded its own unique camera setup, lighting arrangement, rehearsal, and visual effects plan. Once production wrapped, the artists at Rising Sun Pictures combined the practical photography, digital props, water simulations, cleanup work, and speed adjustments into the breathtaking sequence that has since become one of the defining visual effects moments in superhero cinema. Bringing the Sentinels to life became one of the biggest and most technically demanding visual effects projects of the entire film. One of the smartest creative decisions made by director Bryan Singer and his visual effects team was giving the 1973 Sentinels and the future Sentinels completely different designs. This wasn't just for visual variety, it was meant to show how Sentinel technology had evolved over decades. According to the story, the Sentinel program begins with scientist Bolivar Trask, who believes mutants will eventually replace humanity. His solution is to build giant mutant hunting robots. The Sentinels introduced in 1973 are only the earliest prototypes. By the future timeline, however, the technology has advanced dramatically, allowing the robots not only to attack mutants, but to instantly adapt to their powers. That technological evolution is reflected in their appearance as well. Visual effects supervisor Richard Stammers explained that the contrasting designs were completely intentional. The 1973 Sentinels were designed to feel like products of 1970s engineering. Their bodies feature bulky mechanical armor, exposed joints, rigid metal construction, and the classic purple comic book-inspired color scheme. The future Sentinels, however, were designed with an entirely different philosophy. Rather than looking like traditional robots, they were imagined as living metallic organisms. Their bodies are covered with thousands of tiny metallic scales that constantly shift and move across the surface. The inspiration for this came directly from Mystique's blue scales, making the future Sentinels appear like a seamless fusion of advanced machinery and living biology. Creating the 1973 Sentinels also involved far more than computer graphics. After the concept art was finalized, Legacy Effects constructed a massive 18-foot-tall practical Sentinel for the production. This full-size robot stood physically on set whenever actors needed a real reference for eye lines, lighting, and interaction. Having an actual Sentinel present also helped the cinematographers capture realistic shadows and reflections that would later blend perfectly with the digital versions. Whenever the robot needed to walk, fly, attack, or perform more complex movements, the practical model was seamlessly replaced by a fully animated CGI version. By combining practical construction with digital animation, the filmmakers achieved a level of realism that neither technique could have accomplished on its own. The future battle sequences required even more imagination. During filming, the actors weren't fighting giant robots at all. Instead, they performed opposite green poles, tracking markers, temporary reference heads, and occasionally stunt performers standing in for the Sentinels' positions. Every intense battle, every near miss, and every desperate reaction had to be performed purely through imagination. Later, the visual effects artists removed all of those references and replaced them with fully animated digital Sentinels. The filmmakers also paid extraordinary attention to the robot's movement. Bryan Singer specifically wanted the Sentinels to avoid looking like traditional walking machines. Instead, the animation team studied military precision and the movement of predatory animals. The result was a robot that glides almost silently, conserving energy until the exact moment it attacks. As they adapt to different mutant powers, thousands of metallic scales shift across their bodies, transforming their shape in real time. The sound design reinforced that terrifying presence. Instead of relying on familiar metallic clanking noises, the audio team created deep mechanical vibrations, heavy impacts, and low-frequency movements that emphasize the overwhelming weight and power of every Sentinel on screen. Across the entire film, more than 1,000 visual effects shots were created, with the Sentinels representing some of the production's most sophisticated digital assets. The future Sentinels were primarily developed by moving picture company MPC, while Digital Domain handled much of the work on the 1973 Sentinel animations. The combination of practical effects, cutting-edge CGI, realistic animation, and meticulous sound design is exactly why the Sentinels from X-Men Days of Future Past are still considered some of the most believable and intimidating robotic villains ever created for a superhero film. And that's a look behind the scenes of X-Men Days of Future Past. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes breakdown, be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more movie BTS videos, and let me know in the comments which scene surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.